which he's gonna disprove, right? But Markinson, I feel like, is it's the loaded gun to blow this whole case wide open. Too bad he used it on himself.
Is that what are you proud of yourself on that one?
I'm pretty good at Yeah, that was pretty good.
I finally watched. I finally watched.
I
Finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David, and today I finally watched A Few Good Men.
And I also finally watched A Few Good Men.
What does that mean?
So I just watched this movie for the first time on the plane like 3 weeks ago. And then I rewatched it last night to do this episode. So even though I've seen it before you, it's still pretty fresh to me. And when I first watched this, 'cause you know how and I know this is kind of like the whole reason we started the podcast, but I feel like this movie, you see it so many times just like in media, or like you just see it kind of floating around in the $5 bin at Walmart. It's one of those movies that it's like, oh, I've been meaning to watch that, I just haven't. And then I just find those movies tend to pop up on the JetBlue like choice of movies, and that's where I watch them.
Yeah,
Like God intended.
the last plane I was on. So on the way up, it had like horrible selection of movies, and so I watched like the first 45 minutes of Tar, and then I kind of like I knew I didn't have enough time to finish it because it was so long. And then on the way back, I had a great selection of movies, and I had like a layover. So I watched Lion over two different flights, just sitting there crying next to a pilot who was like, he was taking a flight so he could do his job the next day. And I'm just like fucking tears rolling down my face. Like, oh my God.
I um so this movie was too long for my original flight. So I had 40 minutes left, and then I had to wait a week and watch the last 40 on my return flight. But the emotional impact is still, I think the last 40 minutes of this movie is the best part of this movie. Like that's
Yeah.
where it really revs up. I think this whole movie is great. I really enjoy this whole movie. And it's like how we get to the famous "you can't handle the truth" scene, like that infamous scene. How we get there is so much more rewarding than just like knowing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I I don't know. Going into this, I kind of knew what the ending was, right? So
Oh,
I
you
guess it
son of a bitch!
everyone does.
I didn't.
Everyone knows he gets it's one of the most famous lines in like movie
Well, I
history.
know, but I didn't know the context of it. I thought, you know what I thought? I thought a code red was like some sort of well, I knew it was like a marine thing or like an army thing, but I thought it was like I thought this was a case of a crime that took place in a submarine. That's what I thought.
Oh, like the Hunt for Red October?
Yeah, kind of. But yeah.
Well, so I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan. This was the first screenplay that he wrote. Originally, it was a play that then, before I think it even previewed or its original run started, he was tabbed with writing it as a screenplay. Um, I've watched all of Sports Night, The West Wing, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which is like something probably a few other people watched the whole thing of. And then he wrote Moneyball, The Social Network, the Steve Jobs movie, Molly's Game,
Oh,
Being the
so he
Ricardos, which I
so
loved and
he
you didn't.
No, I liked it. I liked it. I just it wasn't like a my type of film, but it was good. My wife and my mom hung out one night when I was out of town and my dad was out of town, and Taylor asked me, what should I watch with your mom? And I'm like, oh man, the cross of like the Venn diagram of like what my mom would be interested in and what she would be interested in is not like a wide margin. But I suggested Being the Ricardos, and they both loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I like that movie a lot. It's got a weird, like, I don't know, I guess somewhat divisive. You know what's interesting about this movie is I was looking at some of like the meta scores, like 69 or whatever, which I know we don't like to talk about a lot, but it's funny.
Nice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, is it 69? Hold on.
You just pulled that out of your ass.
Well, no, I mean it's 60s for sure. I remember that part of it. 62. No,
Oh,
if only.
boo.
Just hoping. But what was really funny about that is like one of the scores was like 100, which also those numbers are like kind of made up. They just base it off like how much the guy talks about he loves the movie. Like some people don't, have the same ranking systems. But Peter Travers, who's my dude at Rolling Stone, gave it 100, and then Jay Scott from the Globe in Toronto gave it a 25. Fuck off. So I think this is kind of a thing that's even more and more with Sorkin now, where he has like a very positive outlook on the ability of like good to triumph over evil. And I don't know if you've been in society lately, but that's not really the way people see things anymore. They just think evil's winning all the time. So I think he's kind of, the more and more he does, like especially in this realm, it gets a little divisive. This movie, if you've watched The West Wing first, just seems like a two-part episode that's connected to that universe.
No, don't say that.
You would love The West Wing. If you loved this movie, you and Taylor would love The West Wing. Like,
No, I'm
absolutely.
sure. I'm sure. God, I just started The Sopranos, and I love that. I love that show right now.
Where are you
And
watching that at? How are you watching that?
some nice guy let me borrow his Max subscription.
Yeah, we should probably
Um,
stop saying that. So, but anyway, what's funny is, so Rob Reiner directed this, right? Aaron Sorkin
yes, yes.
didn't. Aaron Sorkin is the executive producer, directed a lot of the episodes, wrote West Wing for like the first 3 or 4 seasons, whatever. I can't remember the exact amount. Um, but like the way this movie is like shot, the feel of it, the use of music in between scenes, there were so many times in between a scene where there'd be this like very like kind of dark, ominous music playing. I was like, is someone from the military going to be in a car and threaten his life?
No, no.
And at one point, Markinson gets in the car, and
Yeah.
like when he got in the car, I was like, "Oh, I recognize who that is." But like you kept thinking that, and then this is like a telltale thing of all like West Wing episodes that happens at the end of this movie too. Is there's this very like somber, like satisfying, kind of reserved scene, and then the movie cuts to the credits, and it's like the most happy, upbeat like music.
It's funny that you say that, because like the only music thing that I noticed and kind of felt out of place, which is probably why I noticed, is when Galloway is like running in the rain, and Tom Cruise is chasing after her, and Cruise is like, wait, 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 and he's like, please stop, and she's walking away angrily. He gets out in the rain, he meets her, and he's like, I'll put him on the stand. And she turns around, and the music is like this most romantic, whimsical thing. Like you think they're about to kiss, which it wouldn't have made sense then for that to happen, right? And I think what they did with their kind of like will they, won't they thing was actually really smart in the movie. But she turns around, and the music is like the most romantic thing. They're about to kiss, and she doesn't say a word, right? It just what he says about putting Nicholson on the stand, and she turns around, and then it just fades to black. Like the scene ends immediately. It was just kind of funny. It's just I felt like maybe there was a cut there, like there was a take that where she says something, and that scene probably went on a little longer. But then on the editing floor, it was like, no, she says nothing. Let's fade it to black. Moving on.
Well, so this, like I said, this was originally a play. When he was told to write a screenplay for this, the studio that bought the rights for it was like, we want a sex scene. We want these two to hook up.
Hmm.
And apparently, Sorkin tells this story where he's like, well, I don't want to have that in there. And one of the studio guys was like, well, why is Demi Moore in this movie if she's not going to sleep with Tom Cruise? And
Wow.
Sorkin was like, well, women do have other things they can do besides fuck Tom Cruise. Like, you're aware of that, right? He was like just so kind of dejected. And then Rob Reiner came in and is like, we're not doing that shit. He's like, rewrite it, write it the way the play was. I like the play. We're doing
Yeah.
that.
Thank God
So
for some decent people in Hollywood. The thing is like Demi Moore in this is so fucking hot.
I mean,
Just
she always is.
incredibly attractive. Yes, I know she's always incredibly attractive, but something about this movie, I'll tell you, there's nothing like a high rank officer. Have you ever gotten a blowjob from a high rank officer, boy?
Jeez.
No, but seriously, she's incredibly attractive in this film.
His line about unless the way he then goes, unless the president becomes a woman, I'll just have to take cold showers. Basically, like, I answer to no one
Yeah.
in this country but the president is like also a pretty fucking like
Well,
great end cap to that.
so let's kind of like get really into this film. And okay, so it starts out with what happens at the Guantanamo Bay site with Dawson and the other guy who says barely anything in this movie, and I forgot his name. And then Santiago, and then red coating him. And we don't see him die, but we get very soon afterwards. Galloway, played by Demi Moore, has a meeting with the courts about Santiago's death, and so we, as the audience, can put two and two together that them like duct taping him and putting the cloth in his mouth somehow killed him. We don't know quite how at this point. But she wants the case. And I think what's so funny about her is like, and especially what you said about like, oh, why is Demi Moore in this movie if she's not having sex with Tom Cruise? Now, not that you said that, but that the producers said that. But like, Demi Moore is not a perfect character in this film, and I feel like what a lot of like 80s and early 90s films do is they have this super hot female actress portraying this like it's like the James Bond girls who are also scientists, right? I'm not saying women can't be scientists, but
You just call out Denise Richards again.
yes, I did call it Denise Richards. But what I'm saying is that what I like about Demi Moore's character is that she's imperfect and she's kind of quirky. You know, she's not like all those other girls. Uh, but she's practicing like, oh, I want to take this case, so I'm going to be like, sir, I think I would be the best to take this case. And she's practicing that line in the mirror. And then when she goes into her superior to try to convince him to take the case, she flubs the line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like a little detail like that. I think it's like she has very little confidence in herself, and then you're immediately introduced to Tom Cruise, who has every single bit of confidence in the world.
We need to track how many times Tom Cruise has graduated from Harvard Law School. It's at least twice that we've done just on this podcast this year. One thing I want to say at the start of this, and this is like not a thing you see in an episode of The West Wing, so I don't know. I was like, I don't think that happened here, but I was like, did they rape this guy? Because
it felt like that in the beginning, didn't it?
yeah, I was like, when are they going to say that he was assaulted?
No, but he
And
wasn't.
it didn't come up, which is good. I'm glad.
Yeah, let's just stick to murder, okay?
Well, manslaughter. I mean, murder too, I guess, was pretty dangerous what you're doing there. And then the fact that they poisoned it, which is they didn't, but that's what
Well, yeah, that's the thing I want to talk about too. But I love like the classic leading line. He's like, "No, the division's going to assign a lawyer," and he's going to be like, who are you going to assign? Oh, the best. And then it's like cut to Tom Cruise not giving a fuck and playing baseball.
I like. My favorite part of that is, hey, why don't you get a cup of coffee? She's like, I'm fine, sir. He's like, can you please leave so we can talk behind your back?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's funny is the movie, and this is one of the complaints about the movie. Like, there's a Roger Ebert quote about how like he wishes the movie didn't spell out everything for you. And this was like a thought I had going into this. A lot of times I say it really pays to watch a movie twice. I feel like 80s and 90s, like it's kind of unnecessary because everything is so linear and spelled out for you that they don't
Yep.
have these hidden things in the beginning that you forget about and then like will come up later.
No,
Um,
because anything like the um well, there's a couple instances where where when they're at Guantanamo Bay talking to Jack Nicholson for the first time, he it's a I'm not going to say it on the pod, but it's a slur for gay people that starts with the letter F. And he doesn't call Tom Cruise this, but he says his white
Flaming?
uniform, yeah, his white uniform is,
Yeah,
you know,
that.
effing white. And it comes up later in the film, right? But not like too much later in the film. Like that meet at Guantanamo Bay is like at the 50-minute mark. It's almost at halfway through the film. And then in the courtroom in the last scene, there's a lot of like wordplay, right? Like Jack Nicholson's like, um, or no, Tom Cruise is like, uh, grave danger, and he's like, is there any other kind? And then he just uses that to like reword what he wants to say to him. And then he's like, do you copy me? He's like, do you get it? And he's like, is it clear? And he goes, crystal. And then like 5 seconds later, uh Jack Nicholson says to Tom Cruise, like, do you understand? And then Tom Cruise is like, crystal. So a lot of the wordplay happens immediately after it. And so there's nothing, like you said, that's like super set in the beginning that like pays off in the end.
But so like my point in saying that is right in the beginning, we meet Tom Cruise and he's plea bargaining on the baseball field.
Yeah.
And then he immediately gets chosen by division for this assignment. And you have Sam, his who's getting assigned to it too. He's like, why am I even getting assigned to it? He's gonna plead this thing out in 4 hours. So it's just as the audience, and I'm sure you caught this too, you're like, oh, this is a cover up. He's being assigned to cover this up. Now it's interesting.
I actually caught this on my second viewing. I didn't catch it on my first.
Well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But what's another interesting like Sorkinism is like once again him kind of seeing the world in the way he does, like, or at least from the things I've watched. But a lot of writers, I think, would lean into more of a cover up. Like I said, people appearing in Tom Cruise's window, someone like throwing a baseball through his window to scare him. And like none of that happens. Basically, the military
No.
assigns him and just hopes that he does what he does to go away. But they
Yeah.
like will accept the outcome if it doesn't. You know what I
Did
mean?
you the thing is though, I'm talking about nothing like put in the beginning that like pays off in the future of this film, except for the fact that, and I just thought of this. When we're first introduced to him and he plea bargains with that guy who's just annoyed with him, he's like, you've been avoiding me for like weeks now, right?
Right.
He's playing softball
Hmm.
and he comes up with this amazing plea bargain and he accepts it, right? The other guy accepts it. Later
Right.
on in the film, he says something about how he thinks best with a baseball bat in his hand, but he had a baseball bat in his hand in that opening scene. So he was like, he was not like in his uniform and he wasn't at his office, but he was on top of his game, pardon the pun, um, playing softball because he had the baseball bat in his hand.
Yeah, but that's also just a thing to get him to go into his closet because she stuck it in the closet and then he looks at the uniforms, right?
I knew that as soon as like they looked in Santiago's room and he like there was a special shot of like his face with the uniforms in Santiago's closet. I was like, that's gonna come up later.
That actually is probably the one thing that they show, and I was like, okay, whatever. Like, and
Oh
but here's the thing though.
yeah,
And a lot of times that's something, it's a detail that you would forget. But when he goes into the closet and you see all the uniforms, I immediately hearkened back to, oh, they showed all the uniforms in there. Now I didn't know what that he was going to say about that, but then when he says it, like my point is you can watch all of this and catch all of it in one go, like fairly easily to me because it is so spelled out. Like there isn't like these hidden details to me, at least when I watched it.
no. I agree with you. Except for maybe the clothes. Yeah.
So we get to Tom Cruise gets assigned. They want him to go down to Cuba. Um, and we also get this thing about Santiago wanted to be transferred. And Cruise is like, I can get him 12 years, like right away. And then Demi Moore is like, no, you have to dig deeper. And he's like, well, I mean, this is my decision. She's like, no, I outrank you. And so I'm telling you, like, to do a better job than this. And I do think it's interesting. Like, there's two, I guess there's two things about this movie. One, there's like a kind of like a, there's like the legal aspect of it too, but there's also the, like, the bringing the best out of Tom Cruise, like the arc of him really
Right.
caring about the law and
Right.
living in
And
his
it's not
dad's
even well,
footsteps.
it's not really him caring about the law. I think he cares about the law a lot. It's one him caring about people, right? More so than himself. And then the other one is having more respect for the military than he has. And I think that's like best shown in his interaction with Hal Dawson, one of the guys that he's representing. Um and I love that like transition at the end. Oh man, I'm not gonna talk about it now. But um yeah, in the in the beginning, they're all like, "Sir, yes, sir. Ba, sir." And he's like, "Can you quit it with that sir shit?" He's like, "I swear to God, stop saying like."
Right.
And the way Tom Cruise does it, he's like, "When you say sir, I turn around and I expect to see my father." So, you know, like that kind of stuff. And so he's like, "I have a job to do." I guess you could say that he's a lawyer above being a Navyman, right?
Well, Demi Moore says that. She's like, "You're biding your time until you can get out of here and get a real job," which is, I think, is spot on. The next thing I want to talk about, I think it's my big takeaway from this movie. Um, Jack Nicholson is just so fucking good,
Oh yeah,
and we grew up sort of at the tail end where he's still like, if he had his fastball, he wasn't using it as much, right? But
sure.
this, he is so fucking locked in and so fucking good in this. Like, I've seen Chinatown, right? And he's young in that and he's good. But there's like this whole era in between where he just knows how fucking good he is. And it's just like, I don't know. It's just like magnetic and everything he does. Thinking back to like his Joker, right?
Right. Well, you've seen The Shining, right?
Yes,
It's kind
yes,
of like
yes.
that's
Still like younger in that though. My point is this: is just like we need to do more Jack Nicholson movies.
he's getting up there, dude.
No, no, no. I'm not saying he needs to make them. I'm saying the pod. Like, we need to do
Oh,
more of
we
the,
us.
you
Okay.
and I.
Yes.
Um, but I mean, so he's only in 4 scenes, right? And this first one is
It
so
doesn't
great.
feel like he's in 4 scenes. It feels
What
like
is it?
he's in this whole goddamn movie.
I
Like
mean,
his presence is
his
and
shadow looms large.
his shadow looms large, and he's mentioned 1,000 times throughout in scenes that he's not in.
If I had one note in this movie, it's in this first scene. I don't think it makes sense to tell us right away that he didn't want him transferred, right?
I think it does because I think as the audience knowing that, we're now kind of wondering through the whole movie how how do we get to a place where Tom Cruise knows that? I think it makes it more interesting.
Well, no, to me, it's just like, oh, well, then you kind of know where this is going the whole time, right? Like, oh, he's the bad guy. And so it's just like, we're going to watch Tom Cruise get him.
There was a little bit of yeah, maybe. I mean, there's a little bit of like wonder if Kiefer Sutherland was the bad guy too.
Yeah, but I think it's so if you get rid of the scene where he says, don't transfer him, right? Which is also just so weird because this entire movie, but for that scene, is from Tom Cruise's perspective, right? He is like in everything else.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So you just have this scene that's completely taken out of nowhere with just 3 guys. I mean, so this was a play, right? So like that scene probably exists in the play too. But I think if you take that out, you have the scene where Tom Cruise says, "Oh, hey, by the way, can I get his transfer order?" And you have kind of Jack Nicholson for the first time kind of stutter like, yeah, you can have that on your way out. You can get that." And like even Demi Moore later on is like, you asked him that to get his reaction. And we as the audience saw his reaction. So I think without that first scene, although I want more Jack Nicholson in the movie, so I'm fine with it being there. But without that first scene, it's like you're picking up on it just as easily. But it's like, oh, maybe, maybe it was Kiefer. Maybe it was.
Well, you rattled him right at that point, and so it's like he's like, yeah, but if you ask me nicely, and that's where his effing white uniform comes in, and him like being incredibly sexist towards Demi Moore, just downright rude, you know.
Especially
But
with how hot she is. How could you do that to her?
but
That's what you're saying, right?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. But yeah, you kind of see his like macho man on the fence sort of persona crack a little right there.
You do. I mean, talking about that first scene though with Kiefer Sutherland and then Marcus and um, it's
In
just
the
he's
in the dorm room?
no,
No, you're talking about when they're
Jack Nicholson's office,
yeah.
Jessup's office. He's just so good in that scene. Just like the way he like delivers the lines. It's the thing is, there's a lot of actors who you're like they're just themselves in a movie, right? I think you say
Mm.
this about Vince Vaughn a lot. I think Robert De Niro late in his career is a lot of just Robert De Niro.
Bruce Willis.
I mean, I'm not gonna besmirch Bruce Willis. You can do that on your own. You save
No,
that
I'm
for
not
your pod.
disparaging it. I'm just saying don't be
He's going
scared.
through something.
He can't hurt you.
Any- anyway,
I didn't mean for it to sound like that.
you're on your own. The thoughts and
Anyways.
views of Alon do not represent me. But even when like Jack Nicholson just sort of seems to be playing a version of himself in this, it's so interesting and so great, right? That
Yeah,
like
I guess it's a version of himself. Yeah.
I mean, it feels like it a little bit.
I
Turn it
don't know
up.
the guy personally, but yeah. But no, here's a hot take. Kiefer Sutherland uh does not look good shaved head.
He also, man, just during this time played such a fucking shit heel in everything.
You
A
know what?
Time to Kill,
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
what's that fucking movie where the boys discover the dead body?
Um Stand by
Stand by
Me.
Me.
You know, the thing is too is like when he's older now, he's like kind of the hero of the stories. But yeah, when he was younger, he was a little took roles, made him a little hated. You know who also takes roles at that time? That's like just the except for Footloose, who um just played a like you said, a shitheel and everything. He was in is Kevin Bacon. And Kevin Bacon's kind of like in this role too. I feel like if Kevin Bacon was in Sutherland's role or Sutherland was in Kevin Bacon's role in this movie, it could work either way. Um, they're kind of in the same like department as far as actors go, I feel. But Kevin Bacon playing this role as the opposite attorney, um, I think he's great in it. But oh man, did I just want him to lose so bad?
Yeah, but he's actually redeemable, and he makes a few points along the way of being like, "Listen," and I mean, I kind of fucking agree a little bit. Like, these guys deserve to be kicked out of the army. They like giving them 2 years, which they'd serve 6 months. That's a completely fair deal, right? Now, his motivation for doing it seems to be to prepare to protect Jessup, or because his bosses are telling him to. But like, they stuffed a sock in a dude's mouth and killed him, right? Like whether it was poison or
Well,
not.
the
That's a,
intent wasn't there.
I know, but if you do something inherently dangerous like that and someone dies, like Kiefer Sutherland didn't intend to kill that dude who he wouldn't give food to for 7 days. But if that guy dies, that's murder.
Yeah,
At the very least, manslaughter. It depends on
like
you know.
he would have probably gotten away with it too. Um, the thing about like and I have a question, like legal question for you at the end of this, but um, when you have when I'm not saying Kevin Bacon's character isn't unredeemable in this. He's and the thing about it is that he's even kind of likable in this. But the thing about when you have you know who's more likable? Tom Cruise. And so when you have Tom Cruise as your hero, you're always going to take the side of Tom Cruise. But there's a scene where he's like I don't think you should fight this, and he's like, no, I'm just going to plea it out. And then of course Demi Moore is like, no, you should fight this. And when he talks to Dawson and fuck, what's the other guy's name?
Downey.
Downey. When he talks to Dawson and Downey about it, they're like, well, okay, 2 years and 6 months out, but then are we going to be discharged from the military? He's like, probably. And they were like, I want to take this to case, because if they're found completely, I'm sorry, is that not a phrase? Taking it to case,
Taking it to trial.
taking it to trial,
You take your case to trial.
whatever. Taking the case to trial. Um, if they're found not guilty on all charges, then the likelihood of them being able to stay in the military
Very
is
high.
is very high. And that's what they
Absolutely.
wanted. And what's the sick thing is, at the end of this, is that not only were they found not guilty on both counts, but then they still got kicked out of the military.
For conduct unbecoming, which apparently like is not a charge that actually could have applied to them. But yeah,
Well,
I I don't know. You said you had a question. Was there a question in there?
oh well, my question comes at the end, but I guess I can ask it now. Is that, much like in the movie Legally Blonde, if one of your witnesses admits that they're the ones who did the crime, I think it's just a movie thing, right? It's just a Hollywood thing where like the whole trial doesn't come to a halt, and all of a
Oh,
sudden the person who admitted the crime is thrown in prison.
so it can. There's like some procedural steps you have to do. Like you make a motion to the court. Depends on the jurisdiction. It can be like judgment on the you make like a judgment based on like the evidence that's been presented at the time. You also really just turn to the prosecutor and like, yo, bro, what do you want to do? And the prosecutor's like, Your Honor, we want to dismiss the charges. Like, we can't. At that point, you can't win, right? So it's like
Yeah, I
procedurally,
guess.
that's like it kind of would happen. A lot of times, prosecutors don't want to do. So here's this thing that happens. Like a lot of times, someone will be accused of a crime, charged of a crime, whatever, and you'll hear prosecutors come out and they'll say, we're not pursuing charges because we don't have enough evidence at this point to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. And so then when you hear that, you're like, oh, so that person might still be guilty, but the prosecutor doesn't have enough evidence. So this person's just getting off, but they probably still did it. And in reality, what the prosecutor is doing is they might think, oh, no, this person didn't do it. But if they say that publicly, and then they find evidence that this person did do it that they didn't know about, even though originally they thought they didn't do it, they've kind of fucked themselves into being able to charge this person down the line, because you're going to get a jury full of people that heard you say this guy didn't do it. So like, just as a matter of practice, they're never going to come out and be like, oh, this guy didn't,
Right.
like,
And
we
I
know
think
this guy didn't do it.
Right, and I think, this movie handled that better than Legally Blonde did. Although now I'm like thinking of all the similarities between that case and the case in Legally Blonde, and I love that movie, but I have never seen this film since watching that movie. I kind of want to watch Legally Blonde again and see if there's any like references to A Few Good Men. I think there might be.
Did Elle Woods order the code red? How did that work?
Did Elle Woods order the code red? No,
Did
no.
she actually assault someone,
I don't
or,
think she could handle the truth. Um,
definitely not.
the so anyways, like there's this whole thing where they want to go to trial because they don't want to be kicked out of the military, and then they are anyway. But
It also has this little thing where Downey is mentally handicapped still allowed to be said?
yeah, I think you're okay.
They don't ever like outright say it, but he is like too stupid to be in the military or like to feed himself.
I don't think so. I think he's just like a scared kid.
Bro.
Hal, Hal,
Answer his
Hal,
question.
Hal.
No, yeah, something's off. Something's off.
I don't know. I think he was just trying to he was taking orders, and I think the big twist that you said 80, 90 movies are pretty linear. I think the big twist in this is that Downey never got the code red from Kiefer Sutherland or Nicholson. He got it from Dawson, because Dawson then got it from Kiefer Sutherland, but Dawson told him to do this with him.
Yeah, that's one of the few things that's not spelled out. Is there's not a scene after this where they go to Dawson, they're like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, I told Downey, but I didn't think da-da-da. They don't explain that. They at least think you're smart enough to figure that out. There's also this part where and I'll say this, that like a lot of courtrooms are similar. I don't know how military court works. But there's this one part where, so I'm just doing it from my experience from other court, but the part where Downey just says something detrimental to their case, like, "Oh, I guess I couldn't have been there. Dawson told me." And Demi Moore stands up. She's like, we need a moment to confer with my client. You're not allowed to do that. Like,
Well, I don't think she was allowed to do that. I think
no,
they
you're
made it
not.
very
But like,
clear in the
you
movie.
don't even ask, because the
And
judge said,
I
I need to coach my client to say the right thing. Your Honor,
Yeah.
please.
yeah, I need to- well, I mean, she should. What they should have done if this was proper, they should have coached them anyways.
Well, but they're lying to you. So like, she gets blamed for that, and Tom Cruise gets all fucking drunk, which we need to go back and like go through the beginning, start going through the trial. But they're just lying to her. Like, you don't think to ask the question of like, I mean, they didn't. Well, here's one thing. Let me backtrack. I think Kevin Bacon in reality would probably have to give them that information. A normal prosecution, you have it's a Brady violation. I believe Brady is the court case where the prosecution has to hand over all evidence to the defendant. So the fact that they know his story is bullshit, you can't really surprise defendants with that. Now, once again, this is, court martial, so a little different. But yeah, it's kind of a thing that she couldn't foresee coming. I will say this movie, like, the courtroom stuff is all pretty legit. Kevin Bacon does like a lot of leading questions, which like some people, once again, I don't know if court martial, if they care about that, but some attorneys will get all of in a huff if you do that. But
Well, it's just I feel like because Tom Cruise didn't object to any of them, I felt like Kevin Bacon was way more objective to Tom Cruise than he was of Kevin Bacon.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there were certain things that, I mean, because he felt that Kevin Bacon's opening is really good, and he's basically like, these are the facts, they're uncontradicted. Now listen to Tom Cruise tell you a bunch of bullshit that doesn't matter.
Right.
So he was objecting like, hey, this stuff doesn't matter. It shouldn't get in.
You'll be hearing fancy terms like code red. Oh man, one of the best parts of this trial was when he was he goes, "Can you look up code red in the book for me?" And he's like, "Oh no, sir, it's it's just a term, like an inside term." He's like, "Oh, so how could you, like it could be misconstrued if it's not like, in your manual." And then Tom Cruise just to be like,
How do you get to the mess hall?
"How do you get to the mess hall? Is the location of the mess hall in the book?" He's like, "No, sir." And he's like, "Wow, so you haven't eaten in 3 years. Amazing." And it's like that whole thing is just it's awesome.
All right, let's move through a little bit of this just to one thing I want to
Yeah,
talk
so
about.
they get back from Guantanamo Bay, right? And then they're
No,
they're
I'm before that.
no, I'm saying when they do though, that's the last time we see Jack Nicholson until he comes back into the scene at the end. But
Right, yeah.
but as immediately as he goes there, and there's so many little plot things that I'm just backing up a little bit because as soon as they get back from Gitmo, Markinson goes missing. He shows back up, and it's like, and I think this movie does a really good job in writing highs and lows in this film. Like, oh, they're winning. Oh, they're losing the case. Oh, they're winning the case. When they have Markinson, you're like, oh, there's nothing that can stop them now. Well, then until he kills himself.
Yeah. I don't know why you're like, oh, I just want to say this last time we see Jack Nicholson, and then you just completely skip over the stuff I was trying to talk about before that.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So what I want to say is there's this cool little scene with Kevin Bacon where he's like 20 years, serve half. And he's like, no, I want, 12 and whatever. And then he's like, hey, do you know about code reds? And Kevin Bacon's like, all right, you'll get your 12. And then he's like, do you want to make the deal right now? And he's like, well, let me go to Cuba. But like, that is also a hint. There's all these hints that like they want this case to go away until the point of like right before the trial, Kevin Bacon's like 2 years, they'll serve 6. And Tom Cruise is like, fuck, I did it. Like I fucking made this happen. I mean, we already kind of covered the lunch. That's like a pretty
well, you're a
great
shit
scene.
softball player.
Yeah, that's also a good one. I was talking about the lunch with Jessup.
Oh,
where he agrees to he said he agreed to the transfer, and like, you know, he's lying, and it's obvious he's lying. And then Joe has questions, Demi Moore, and Tom Cruise is like, please stop asking, stop asking.
I have a question. No, she doesn't. Um, please stop, Joe.
Yeah. Well, and it's really funny too, is he says this thing like off the record, he's like, what about Code Reds? He's like, off the record, if it happens without my knowledge, it's an invaluable part of training. It's like, you're not in court. There's no record, or like you're just giving them ammo to like, it's a big fuck up for him to do this.
Yeah, did you know that if you say the words off the record before any any admission of guilt or anything you say, it doesn't count?
Your Honor, they can't ask me these questions because I said off the record when I kind of gave them the hint about,
Yeah.
what kind of asshole I am. So he gets the 2-year deal. He takes it to them. Dawson's like, I won't plead guilty. The court can just tell me if what I did was wrong. I don't agree that I did anything wrong. And fucking Cruz is just like defeated and is like, I'm going to get out of this case. And it's really funny. Demi Moore goes from like, you're an exceptional lawyer, you can win this for them, you're their only chance, to a second later, she's like, you're a used car salesman. And I'm like, which is it, Demi? Like, is he good or is he not? And why do you think? Why does she think he's good? And then why does he end up being good? Because he
Yeah.
just concedes. He just pleads out all of his cases.
I
So
think
why are we like, this guy's good?
it's in his genes.
That's true. That's true.
His his daddy was good, his granddaddy was good, his great granddaddy was good, therefore he's good.
I don't know if we know about the great granddaddy.
No, but you have this whole thing looming over Tom Cruise's head about how his dad is this great trial lawyer, and so he wants to be like his dad. And there, I mean, to the point where he signed into the military where he didn't even want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, to be in Navy, to be a lawyer, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know anything about this field, but to be a lawyer in the Navy, don't you have to go through basic training?
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
So you have to go through Navy training, and you also have to go through law school. So it's like he had to do all this military training, and I guess just hated it.
I don't know. I think he was trying to a little bit like do what he thought his dad would like, but also at the same time like didn't really, give a shit about it. So I think that's kind of the
Mm.
deal on that. I want to get to, so he goes to this bar, and do you remember the scene where there's just this lawyer talking about like the Delaware insurance code and how he got this deal and da 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 da,
Yeah.
as Tom Cruise is sitting at the bar? So that was Aaron Sorkin,
Oh,
the
okay.
writer. And then next we get to court, and Cruz looks so uncomfortable. Like, doesn't look like he knows what he's doing, like barely stands up when he's supposed to. And he makes this comment like, this is what a courtroom looks like. And the judge is like, all right, we're going to adjourn for 3 weeks and then we're going to have trial. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this explains why there's an hour and a half left in this fucking movie. This movie's so damn long.
Yeah.
And then there's a half a minute montage of the 3 weeks, and then we're in trial.
It's more than half a minute. That montage goes for almost 10 minutes. I think six and a half minutes
I
of
think you're making that up, but maybe.
I am. And it's a good montage though. Like, it's hard to pull off and I mean, if anyone can pull it off, it's the 80s, 90s, man. But I was surprised to learn that it was 3 weeks worth of montage, but hey,
We get to the trial.
we get to the trial. And without Markinson's testimony, Caffey kind of believes that the case is lost.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of go through this bit by bit, I think, pretty quickly. I already talked about like the opening. I thought both of them were really great, kind of working with what you had.
I mean, the scene that rivals the one between Caffey and Jessup is the one between Caffey and I don't know Sutherland's character name, but
Kendrick.
Kendrick. The one with Kendrick is really good. And you would think if you were Kendrick, you would think that you would kind of you're being thrown under the bus by Jessup.
Uh, yeah, but I don't. I think they all kind of knew to toe the line. I think that was kind of the point of what they were doing.
So
So
am I getting this right? So he lied on court about ordering the code red because he went back into Dawson's room and ordered the code red there only because Jessup ordered him to order the code red, right?
yeah, I mean, they don't explicitly say it, but the fact that Kevin Bacon at the end is like, "I'm gonna go arrest Kendrick," and he says, "Say hi to him for me." He's like, "I will." Leads you to believe that yeah, Jessup told him to tell them. So it's like a whole line of people that are getting got.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the first witness. He's McGuire. He investigated the shooting. We didn't even talk about this. Dawson was accused of shooting over the fence line. He
Oh my
said he
God,
was
you're right. We
engaged.
didn't even talk about this.
He was engaged by a Cuban soldier or whatever, and so he shot back. Um, and there's this thing where then it's Cruz's turn, and he's like, "Oh, so you didn't even charge Dawson for this, right?" And he's like, "No, I didn't." And then Kevin Bacon smartly is like, "Well, why didn't you charge him?" And he's like, "Well, there's no evidence because I couldn't interview him." And the way Kevin Bacon asked it, I thought it would just be kind of easier to be like, well, why couldn't you interview Santiago? And he would have been like, oh, because he was killed first. And then it like leaves it with the jury. There's this interesting thing when you go to court. Like sometimes you're doing it for a judge and then you can brief everything afterwards. And so you don't have to be as theatrical. But when you're doing it for like a jury like this, you you kind of need to like leave your point to be the last, right? Like the recency bias of who hit the last. So
Right.
that's why he comes, it's obvious like why he couldn't interview Santiago, but you come back and say, well, why not? And it's like, oh, because he was killed.
There's so much bullshit that happens in a courtroom. I feel like strike that from the record. I feel like it's such a bullshit because it's like what you're like expecting the jury to literally unhear something. Like that's not happening.
It's not that you're expecting them to unhear it, you're expecting them to not consider it when they make the decision, which when you
Yeah,
have
but
like,
come on.
yeah, when you have like 12 lay people, I mean, even when you have a judge, they're like, well, I still heard it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the striking the record I never got, but also the like, um, the theatrics of it makes sense to me because you just kind of want to put on a show for the jury, like you said. You want to be the more like politics. You kind of want to be the more charismatic one. But
Do you
I
want to
had
talk
a
about Cuba Gooding Jr. real quick?
yeah.
So I don't really care about his testimony so much. He kind of testifies that hey, Kendrick told none of us to do this, and then Tom Cruise comes in and asks one question: were you in their room 20 minutes later at 16:20? And he just says no, so that it's in the jury's head and he can make a closing argument. Yeah, he said it in this meeting, but then we have two people that testified that he in at 16:20 and privately he told them to do this, right? And so then Kevin Bacon is going to call 22 other people to testify to the exact same thing Cuba Gooding Jr. Testified, and to show you like the incompetence of this, like the government on this, is they flew all these people from Cuba to DC, and Tom Cruise is like, can we just stipulate that they all didn't hear this, but they all also weren't in the room at 16:20? And it's like Kevin Bacon has no choice but to say yes, because if you say no and the court is like, all right, I guess we'll hear all this testimony, you've pissed off like the judge and the jury who's like, but we know what they're going to say. Why do I
Yeah.
have to listen to this
Well,
22
it's
times?
exactly. I love it too. Like later on, when Tom Cruise threatened to bring in all like 387 members of the Gitmo unit what was it? It was something dumb, but he's like Kevin Bacon was like, you can't actually bring in all these people. He's like, no, of course not. But my point is that they would all say the same thing.
Right. Yeah,
I
right.
think it's about the code red. I think it was about the code red.
Um, so next we have Dr. Stone, played by Christopher Guest.
So he's corrupt, right? Like he's a sack of shit.
Yeah, maybe not in real life.
No,
You know who Christopher Guest is?
now that you say it, the name sounds familiar.
Directed Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, for your consideration.
Oh,
Also in a little movie called Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap.
oh, that's where I know him from. Yes, yes, yes.
So yeah, I mean, Demi Moore wants to question him on, hey, you changed your findings after talking to Jessup, and Tom Cruise at this point is still not like, I'm gonna go after Jessup. He still hasn't like committed to that.
Right.
So I love when Demi Moore objects again and the judge is like, he is an expert. And Sam is like, I strenuously object, huh? Is that like a legal term I'm not familiar with? Like that you like you really mean it, and so the judge should listen to you.
Yeah.
And he just explains to her like, dude, we got the objection on the record already. What you did is you just had the judge tell the jury, in his opinion, this guy is an expert.
Yeah.
He
That's
just said
fuck.
it.
Kevin Pollock, Pollock, however
Pollock.
you say it, Pollock. He's like he doesn't have a huge role in this, but he's incredible in this. He's incredibly entertaining in this.
Yeah, he's really great. There's this cool scene that we already alluded to with Bacon. Tom Cruise goes to Kevin Bacon, is like, I have Markinson, and Kevin Bacon. This is one of those things that is sort of alluded to in this scene, and then it plays out later. So he's like, hey, if you accuse these two guys with no evidence, you're going to get court-martialed and you might get kicked out.
Right.
And you're like, why is Kevin Bacon telling him this? He has Dawson, Downey, and Markinson, 3 people testifying that will testify, have said they will testify that Kendrick gave the code red.
Yeah.
So that is
I mean,
evidence. So it's like,
Markinson is the loaded gun,
well, yeah, but my point is, he says to Tom Cruise, if you say this without any evidence, you're going to get in trouble. But he has evidence. Testimony is evidence. But Kevin Bacon knows in the back of his head that he knows that Tom Cruise doesn't know this, that Downey couldn't have heard Kendrick give the code red order because he wasn't there. Downey was running to the base.
which he's gonna disprove, right? But Markinson, I feel like, is the it's the loaded gun to blow this whole case wide open. Too bad he used it on himself.
Is that what, are you proud of yourself on that one?
I'm pretty good at yeah, that was pretty good.
So Downey, who's an idiot, maybe medically, fucks up on the stand. He's like, how? As you already said.
Well, remind me to never, like, geez, man, were you never a scared little kid? Jeez.
Not after. No, I'm also not a Marine. So Demi Moore comes over. Tom Cruise nowhere to be found. Comes home drunk. He's like, what, 80% into a bottle of Jack?
I'd be floored. You couldn't
I'd
pick
be
me up
dead.
with a spatula. You'd be dead.
I'd be dead, and I'd also need a whole hell of a lot of water. I get super dehydrated very quickly.
I love it. She's like, I'm gonna make coffee, and then he's there drunk, like, she's gonna make coffee. That's great.
Yeah, no. And it's funny is Demi Moore's like, I think we can fix it. We'll move on to Markinson. He's like, Markinson's dead.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I still think we can win, subpoena Jessup. And she's like, you asked Jessup about the transfer. You knew you didn't need to ask him that, but you did it to see.
Yeah, you knew something was up. You knew something was fishy with that guy. I love how he just got over him being drunk by wait, hold on. Is this oh no, this is the rain scene, right? Yeah, he got over being drunk by going out and getting a little rain on his head.
I think he was still a little drunk, but Tom Cruise has like magical powers where he doesn't get drunk the same as the rest of us, though. He
That's
kind of
true.
allows himself to be drunk, really.
That's thanks to Scientology.
But that was what I was fucking alluding to. Thanks for spelling out the joke. I appreciate it. So she says you need to put Jessup on the stand to get it out of him that he ordered the code red. And this is an issue with this movie. If your whole plan to win a case is you're going to have an opposition witness and you're going to get him to admit to the thing you're trying to get him to admit to win your entire case, you have a shit case.
Yeah.
And in the original play, I think what happens is Cruz gets the logbooks in the play. The Cruz character gets the logbooks that show there was an earlier flight, and it's like this smoking gun that he's lying, and then then the dominoes fall or whatever. But in this, like, he has nothing, and so like when he gets mad at her, he's like, "You just want me to get this guy to admit to the thing that he knows that he can't admit to, that will send him to jail. I'm just going to get him to admit to it." And so he's right for being angry, but also she's like, "We have nothing else," which is true. Like, they have nothing else. So it's either give up or you have to do this. Now there is this added, if you accuse this guy who is what, second most powerful to the president, you're
Right.
going to lose your job and
Or
maybe go to jail.
he wants to be second most powerful to the president. He's up for the job, right? That's
Well,
the
yeah,
big.
but I was alluding to him saying that, like,
Oh yeah,
the only
him.
woman that could be more powerful than me is if a female
You
was elected president.
you know what's funny is I'm kind of noticing this too. It's like the cockiness of Nicholson used to be the cockiness of Cruz, and I think maybe Cruz could see a lot of himself in Nicholson if he kept going down the path that he was going down. Because if you remember at the beginning of this movie where Demi Moore was like, "I'm going to talk to your superiors," and Cruz goes, "Oh, it's very easy to find. You just go down Pennsylvania Avenue. It's the big white house with the columns."
Right.
It's very much the same energy when Nicholson was like, "Unless a female becomes president, then I won't have a female superior officer." Um, I think what really made Cruz go after Nicholson is the fact that he saw himself, his cocky side of himself in there, and he wanted to smush it.
Yeah, so there's this very heartwarming scene between Sam and Cruz where he's like, I'd pick, if these kids had a choice, they should pick you over your father because, like, you can do this, Tommy. And then he runs in the rain and says, "I'm gonna subpoena Jessup." Um, his plan after this is that he knows that Jessup wants to say that he ordered the code red, that he doesn't feel like hiding what he has to do to keep America safe, which is
And
alluded to by Jessup's off the
yeah,
record comment earlier.
yeah, and how would he know that if he didn't see himself in him too?
I also love the Jack Nicholson impression from Tom
Oh
Cruise.
yeah, and you know what I like to believe? I like to believe that Moore and Pollock didn't see it coming, and so their reaction to it is like a genuine, like, that's hilarious.
That is what happened.
That is what happened.
Yes, it is.
You have that as like a fact.
That's fact.
Did Jack Nicholson not know what happened until he saw the footage?
I don't know about that part. I don't think Jack Nicholson seems to lead the life that he doesn't watch his own movies.
Okay.
He's not firing up the bucket list tonight.
If
Like
you
it
let
was
me let me
half of
ask
his
you
evening.
let me ask you something. If you were an actor who had the filmography of like Tom Cruise or Jack Nicholson, and I'm not saying the exact films, I'm saying like the amount of films that you've done, would you watch your own movies?
The good ones, maybe.
The good
I would
ones?
definitely watch my Mission Impossible series because those are badass. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
wish we could do all six. Eventually, we will on a little side business. Um, so let's just get to court. More. There's this last thing that
Oh,
Demi.
I do want to mention this before we move on. This is our 4th of July episode. So happy Independence Day, everyone.
Rah rah. So Moore warns him one last time, "Hey, if you don't think you can get him to admit it, you need to back off. I'm internal investigations, and I'm telling you, you could get in trouble." And when Jack Nicholson, I have this thing. I don't know if you've noticed this, where I keep stumbling before I say Jack Nicholson, because for my entire life, Jack Nicholson and Jack Nicklaus, who is a golfer, I know you don't know that. Um, I have said they're like, you know what I mean? Like, I pause for a second, like, which one's the golfer,
Oh,
which one's the
yeah.
actor? Like, it's
Yeah.
always a stumbling block, even though I know which one's which, right? They look completely fucking different. But anyway, when Jack Nicholson walks into the courtroom with 23 minutes left, I looked at the time and saw it was 23 minutes left, and I was like, I just love the leg room they left for him to have this final scene, like,
Yeah.
to just give us everything, because this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and it could be a lot shorter. We need to get to court faster All the
Um,
court stuff is great, but we need to get there quicker than we did.
I guess. I mean, I love this movie, and I like the pacing of this movie, but that's probably just a personal preference. Um, with Jack Nicholson coming into the court, his monologue is one of the most famous monologues in cinema, right? Like, it's
Yeah,
not just you can't handle the truth. There's like a whole 5 minutes after this that he's just talking uninterrupted, and it is great.
it
It's
is.
amazing.
You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Yeah.
Um, I love the so before this, there's a lot of like back and forth. He gets him to admit a few he gets him to say a few things that he then uses on him later, which is great. But there's this part where Tom Cruise starts looking around the courtroom
Yeah.
and deciding, should I go for this? And everyone's kind of looking at him like, don't do it. Um, and Jack Nicholson, who just doesn't think he answers to no one, starts walking away. And he's like, I didn't dismiss you. Sit back down. And he's like, it's, commander or colonel or sir. And then the judge is like, call him colonel or sir. And he's like, thanks. And he's like, and I'm judge or your honor. I think I've earned that. Like, right back at him. But this is like the rattling of him. Like he started to rattle him.
Yeah.
And there's this one thing that I didn't even think about, which is like a really good argument that he makes,
Who?
is Tom Cruise,
Okay.
where he says to him, you said that your men listen to your orders, but you also said you sent him because he's dangerous. Those two things, like, they can't exist together, because if they always listened to your orders, then he wouldn't be in danger and you wouldn't need to transfer him.
Yeah, the whole point of the scene.
Well, I'm saying it's like a thought that I didn't have until he brought it up. It's like just the incongruity of the fact that, like, well, sometimes they don't listen to yours. It's like, but that's not what you said. You said they always do. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And then before this with Sutherland, it's like you prove that if they don't, they get severely punished. So right? So they always so why wouldn't they follow your orders? Um yeah, dude, my favorite part of this scene is not that, although that is pretty damn good. And it's not even the truth thing. My favorite part of the scene is like when you got here, you made 3 phone calls.
Yeah.
And he had him list the 3 phone calls and why he made them. And then he's like, and you packed. He's like, can you tell me why Santiago, if he knew in 7 hours he was going to get on a plane forever, he called no one and he packed nothing. And the fact that that was all dismantled by 2 things Jack Nicholson says, it goes, maybe he didn't have any friends, and maybe he's an early riser and preferred to pack in the morning. And the way, like you mentioned this, Tom Cruise looks around the courtroom like, did he not think that those 2 things could have been arguments?
Well, so no, I think one of those 2 arguments are kind of stupid, right? Like he
They're kind
needs.
of stupid, but they gave a reasonable doubt enough to like dismiss it.
Well, I mean, really, the whole point of Tom Cruise asking that is not to get the answer. The answer doesn't matter. It's to let the jury you're letting the jury see your argument of like, hey, this doesn't make sense that this dude didn't pack his entire life up, his huge barracks full of stuff. He didn't pack any of that up, and he didn't make a single phone call. You know why he didn't do any of that? Because this guy wasn't leaving. He had not been told he was leaving. Really, Kevin Bacon should have objected for speculation, because how can he know why Jack Nicholson can't know why Santiago did anything. You know what I mean? It's not he doesn't have his mind. So, but as you said, he gave an answer like Jack Nicholson was kind of acting as a lawyer. He's like, Kevin Bacon, you're fucking up. So I'll just tell him like, well, how am I supposed to know what this guy's thinking? Maybe he's an early riser, or maybe he has no friends.
Right.
I like afterwards, and this was like a thought I had too. Have you? I talked about Shooter the other day. Have you seen Shooter?
Yes.
So in the end of Shooter, there's a similar scene where Mark Wahlberg. Spoiler alert: if you haven't seen Shooter, fast forward 30 seconds. But Mark Wahlberg pulls out his gun in this meeting with DOJ and points it at Danny Glover and shoots it. And he's like, "It won't fire because the firing pin's missing. I took it out of every rifle, so this gun couldn't have been used. So I couldn't have committed this crime." And Danny Glover's like, fuck it. what do I care? I can't be charged anyway. And so I thought after Jack Nicholson admits to the Code Red that he was just going to walk away, and he thought the same thing. And they're like, what the fuck are you doing? You just admitted to murder, you dumbass. You're going to jail.
And then he just seems so surprised when I know they're not called bailiffs in a military court, but when the two officers like surround him, and do you think it was ad lib? He's like, I'm gonna like piss
I'm
in your
gonna
skull,
rip out your eyes and
and
piss
piss in your skull. Yeah.
I don't know. Tom Cruise handled it well. He's like, "You're going to jail, you son of a bitch." And then we get the ruling. I kind of knew this was going to happen. I knew they weren't going to get off scot free. This was kind of
Bittersweet.
well, it's the jury like, hey, yeah, you were following orders. That's a really tough situation, but you can't be Marines anymore. So time served and get the fuck out. But what
Now, time served means that the time that they've already spent in lockup is the time that it's counting towards their punishment.
yeah, it's basically like, how many days have you been in jail? 17. Okay, 17 is what we're giving you, and you've already served it.
Okay. I thought that's what it meant. I didn't know for sure.
You get credit for time served even if you're sentenced to life, which a lot of times doesn't really matter.
Nah.
I do love the very ending where there's the whole thing about like, you don't need a patch on your arm to have honor, and then he salutes him when earlier he wouldn't.
That's what I was thought. That's what I wanted.
Did you
to
fucking
bring
cry?
up.
Did you cry, you big fucking baby?
I didn't cry, but I was just like awe-inspired. I was just like standing up.
You have
clapping.
You have to watch The West Wing. You'll do that every episode.
There's a commander on deck, or whatever he said.
But I love when Kevin Bacon's like, hey, what were those guys going to testify to? And he's like, they were going to testify that they don't remember shit. He's like, oh, strong witnesses. I love that little like bit between them. And then, as I said, it's a somber ending, and then the happy music over the credits is just such a weird little end to it.
And it ends quick too. Like as soon as that's done, fade to black. There's a moment way before this I wanted to mention it, but we kind of got lost in talking about the plot. But it's after the first courtroom scene, and Tom Cruise is leaving, and he turns to Demi Moore and Jason Pollock, and he goes, "Oh, so this is what a courtroom looks like."
Kevin Pollock.
I said Kevin Pollock.
You said Jason.
I said Jason Pollock?
Yeah, I don't even know who that is.
I made up a guy. Made up a whole man.
He probably exists.
Hey, listen, to anyone listening to our episode named Jason Pollock, give us a shout out on Twitter at Finally Watched.
And Kevin, if you're listening, we apologize.
And Kevin Pollock, I'm sorry. Dude, I said it before, I'll say it again. This is our 4th of July episode. No, I'm kidding. I love this movie. It feels like when Tom Cruise wanted to do like another Jerry Maguire, but didn't want as much sports in it, but still wanted like some sports in it. And then he also wanted like to do another Firm, but then and it's like this movie is like an in-between of his character from The Firm and Jerry Maguire. Cuba Gooding Jr. was even in this one.
Show me the money.
I liked it.
Couple things I want to talk about first. So it was reported that Demi Moore had to lower her quote because she normally made $3 million a movie, and she lowered it to $2 million so she could get the role, because Jodie Foster, Linda Hamilton, and Michelle Pfeiffer were all considered for the role. I mean, I only see Linda Hamilton in the Terminator movies, so that's tough for me. I haven't seen her in really anything else. That's on me.
I don't think Jodie Foster would have been good in this.
Yeah. Jodie Foster could have really easily done this.
I'm saying I don't think she could have.
Oh, well, I disagree.
Because I don't think she would have had the chemistry with Tom Cruise.
I don't know. Agree to disagree on that. The other thing, so Jack Nicholson, when people do, like when you have when you're shooting a scene, you have to shoot the back of someone's head so that you can get like the reaction
It's
shots.
it's called a reverse shot. Yeah. Did he use a stand-in for that?
No, he went fucking hard in the paint every time he had to do his monologue, even when the camera wasn't on him.
Oh my god.
And
Okay.
then he did it for his ending. The last one was when he was actually doing it when it was on him.
What a champ.
So yeah, I really like this too. Yeah, I compared it to like an episode of West Wing earlier, and you're like, oh no, don't say that, don't say that. I love West Wing. But this movie has definitely it's a 90s feel, right? It's definitely, like as I said, super linear, and I do think it fits nowadays. I don't know. It just, you have to fucking watch The West Wing. Like, and if you watch a couple episodes, you'd be like, oh yeah, that does feel a lot like that movie,
I'm sure.
which is interesting.
I wasn't saying anything bad about the West Wing because I haven't seen it. I was just saying, like, I don't say it's like 2 episodes of television back to back because I feel like the production is more than that, you know?
I know, but you have to like the feel of it. My point is, it's so weird that was like an Aaron Sorkin like fully controlled vehicle, and this is like a Rob Reiner directed movie with Aaron Sorkin writing, and it feels so much like The West Wing. It like leads me to believe that, you know, Sorkin took a lot from this experience when he started doing that show. So yeah, no, I love this movie. I always knew I would because I love the dialogue. I also like Tom Cruise could probably have been a lawyer in another life.
Yes, as well as many as he plays. Yeah, I'm sure of it. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David, and I finally watched A Few Good Men.
And I also finally watched A Few Good Men.